No matter how hard you try, you no matter how hard you try, accidents will happen in your classes. Some of those accidents might require a plaster or a little bit of basic first aid, and some of them might be far more serious than that and completely change everybody's lives involved, and could potentially lead to you or your academy being sued. To avoid accidents happening and the ramifications of those accidents, it's essential that as instructors and martial arts school owners, we have certain things in place to protect ourselves and protect our students. My name's Tom Barlow. I have been teaching martial arts for over 20 years now, and I've actually been in the situation where my academy has been sued. And in this video, I want to share some of the lessons I learned from that and the things that you should need to have in place to protect yourselves as well. So this isn't going to be one of those super exciting videos where we learn how to grow our schools or any of that fun stuff. Okay, how to teach better classes potentially. Okay, instead we're going to be talking about some quite dry things, but in my opinion this is probably one of the most important videos that I have ever shot. Okay, so for the sake of this video, we're going to break it down into two areas. We're going to look at business practices, so how you structure your gym, the things that you have in place before people step on the mat, and then we're going to look at teaching practices as well. Okay, and within each of those, there are going to be certain elements that are really important that we start to use. The first one that I want to discuss is I'm going to talk about insurances. Okay, now as an academy owner, you have to have these in place. Every one of our instructors, no matter whether they are an assistant or whether they're teaching a full class, has indemnity. I think our policies are at 5 million, but you can get them higher than that. You can get 10 million as well. On top of that, we have member-to-member insurance as well. This is all done through the UK BJJ, who have a good service and they provide a good policy at a very reasonable rate. Having said all of that, if you have a number of instructors, this is going to be a large chunk of change. We're talking about probably thousands a year to make sure that you're properly covered. That sounds like a lot of money, but if you're ever in the situation where you are being sued, or you do have a person that's claiming against you, you need to have those things in place. Okay, it is really, really crucial. Okay, so you've got to have those insurances there ready to go. I'm going to get that one off the bat straight away. If you don't have them, sort them out today. Okay, now, on top of that, there's a few things that we need to do when students first start the academy to make sure they're aware of the risks that are involved, plus highlight any potential areas before they happen. So the first one that we want to do is every member that comes in always fills out a membership form for us. That includes things like their name, date of birth, some emergency contacts, which is really important. And within that as well, we also have a PARQ. Now a PARQ is a physical activity readiness questionnaire. Okay, and it's a very simple document, it has a number of questions on it. I will in fact show you on my screen now. But a PARQ basically, it just highlights any kind of issues that might come into place. Okay, so this is a PARQ, just a blank kind of pre-made PARQ. As you can see, this is a paper one. You could do this online. Personally, I would recommend trying to transition over to an online system. We have it within ours. So whenever someone fills out their membership form, it's stored on their file. Okay, that means the likelihood that it's going to get lost is greatly reduced. Okay, plus it cuts down on paperwork. Obviously, that's better for the environment. And you can see the questions on here are all very, sensible. It's things like, have you ever had a heart condition? Do you often feel pain in your heart and chest? Have you been pregnant in the last 6 months? Do you have any bone or joint problems? Are you currently on any medication? Simple questions, but they can highlight potential issues that your student may have and reasons that you might want to get either a doctor's note or some confirmation from a doctor that they're actually suitable or ready to participate in the sport. Okay, I have countless experiences of people coming through this and something being highlighted like that I wouldn't have necessarily known about. So, have you bone or joint problems? Yeah, when I was 3 years ago, I was in a motorcycle accident and I broke my ankle. I've got plates in it, I've been advised not to put any stress-bearing load on it. That's the situation that's happened to me. We then have to go through and be like, okay, we're not even going to let you try a class until we get a doctor's note, if it's something that's serious. Or it might be a situation where I've had people that have told me about medication they're on, and then, I get clarity of that. So things like asthma is a very common one. It's like, okay, well, do you have an asthma pump available? So that in case you have any emergencies, we can deal with that straight on the mat. Is it down by the mat? Is it somewhere accessible? Do we know where it is and what's going on? I've also had people with much more serious conditions come up to me and tell me, for example, I've had a schizophrenic come in and train, and they told me that they highlighted the schizophrenic medication that was under control, but it's important for us to be aware of because there are side effects that can happen from that. And if they are in an incident, let's say that they're knocked unconscious, I need to be able to relay that information to a paramedic in case there's any, I can't remember the names, but like any medication that interacts with it. They need to know that kind of stuff. So that's our PARQ, and then it should be signed, ideally witnessed as well. So you have some backward that you've done basic duty of care for your students. Okay, that's really what all this is going to come down to, is good duty of care stuff. So if you'd like a copy of that, I can send it to you. There's loads online that you can use, but it starts to give us some information about our student. The next one is an informed consent form. You can also use a waiver as well. Now, if you talk to most people, most lawyers, they'll say that waivers won't hold up in court. Okay, and that's probably pretty accurate. Okay, they're not going to protect you from someone suing you. What they are going to do is show that you've taken time to highlight the risks of doing an activity. So if you're up in front of a judge or insurance company and you're saying, look, we told this person, there are certain risks involved in it. We highlighted them. We tried to make them as aware as possible to mitigate them ever experiencing those things. Okay, it's another layer of, again, showing that duty of care to your students, which can only help. Okay, so this is, again, just a blank duty of care form, or informed risk, which says things like bumps and bruises, dislocations, yada, 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 goes through all of the different kind of common injuries that might occur. And then it also highlights the things that we're doing within our classes to try to mitigate those injuries. So, talking about, proper warm-ups, making sure our equipments are in order. We have staff training, first aid training, skills are appropriate for the classes and the level of students there. Okay, so those are really important things. And again, we get people to ideally sign, declare that they've read it and sign it and date it, which goes and stored online for their file. Okay, so they're those two really, really important forms that we have in place. Okay, now, the next kind of element of this duty of care is there's something that kind of goes on behind, but is really important, because again, these are the things that are going to get asked by, do you have background checks on your instructors? The situation, this is things like specifically to do with any kind of child abuse or vulnerable person, is like, have you checked them out? Have you made sure that, they don't have, prior criminal records and they're barred from working with children? Any of those things are in place. So you've got to have, for the UK, it's DBS. You've got to have those in place. A number of companies do that. I'm pretty sure, again, UK BJJ, for anybody out there who's a member, they'll do it for you. You can do it in yourself as well. Very simple to do. We actually have all of our instructors on like a monthly policy. So, not a monthly policy, a yearly policy. So I think it costs like £13 a year. And every year we get a renewed DBS check from them. Okay, because again, it's adding that layer of security. Next thing that you want to have in place is a risk assessment for your environment. Okay, so what are the potential risks? Let's say that someone fell into a wall. What is the likelihood that that's going to happen? What is the severity of injury that's going to take place? And what have you done to mitigate that? So the best example would be something like padding your walls, right? If you know that people are likely to hit your walls, put pads on them. It shows that you've taken that level of care. Same if you've, let's say you have a bench near your gym, near your mat, right? What have you done to mitigate the risk of people falling into that bench? Have you created like a different colored matting around the edge of your mat to show when they're getting close to the edge? You know, what are these things that you've put in place to avoid people getting risked? And you need to think about that for your entire gym. Okay, and you can go quite extreme with that, but you know, it really does come down to what is the likelihood it's going to happen, what is the severity of injury that could happen, and what are the risks that what have you done to mitigate those things. Okay, that can be done once and you're good to go. Next thing that you need to have in place is accident reporting. Okay, you can buy accident reporting books off Amazon for about $10. It's just a simple form. It says, it's got a number on it, you know, a little bit of personal information about the person, date that it happened, location, what happened in the accident, what steps you took, and then it's signed and you fill it out after. Basically, I look at the way that I fill these out is after any time that I have to treat somebody. So if I give someone an ice pack, for example, and they have to sit out training, then I'm filling out that accident report form. Okay, if it's like, you know, they bend their thumbnail back, I'm probably not gonna do it for those ones, in all honesty. But it's anything that I end up having to give kind of some kind of basic first aid to. Okay, which is really, really important. Now, if I have a serious accident, then I'm going to take another step on top of that and write out like an in-depth report of what happened. You know, so I've only had to ever do this maybe 2 or 3 times where I've had an accident serious enough for this to take place, but I go into a lot more depth. The problem with the accident report forms is they're kind of generic. They don't necessarily allow you to put a lot of information in there. So I do a written statement and then I will staple that to the report form. So if I'm ever, you know, need to give this to someone from insurance or a lawyer, like at the time, I've put my best memory of that down, okay? Which then leads on to our next step is you should really, you want to have CCTV in place in your gym. Like this can be quite an expensive step, but it is really important for protecting yourself and your instructors and your students in the case of anything happens. So if there is an accident that does take place or any kind of incident, you have a record of that. And you need to have that stored somewhere, you know, if it's up on the cloud, on a hard disk or both, take that off, save it somewhere else so that you have this physical record of that injury taking place and what happened. This is also really important in terms of you know, if you're not necessarily teaching all the time, you can see what's going on at your gym. If you have disagreements between students, all of those things can be solved by CCTV. Okay, so really, really important one, an important step to take. So that's kind of the main kind of business practices that we look at having in place. And they're things that I can always then give over to a lawyer or someone from an insurance company to show that we have this duty of care in place, that we've done as much as we can to create a solid business structure that limits risk. In terms of what happens on the mat, we also have this other layer as well. So the first thing that you want to have in place is some kind of instructor training. Okay, now there are a lot of courses out there. You can do sports leadership courses that are going to be available, you know, different ones that are available. I know there's like one in for like traditional jiu-jitsu that you can go through and do that the British Army use. There might be other accredited courses that you can go through. Like I say, sport leadership is one. Or you can have an internal thing. The external ones are probably going to carry more weight, but as long as you have some kind of record of, number one, that they've completed this instructor training and you have a record of what the syllabus is, which is very important. So your syllabus should include things like, you know, safety precautions, what happens in case of accidents, all of those things. As long as you have that, it's going to give you some kind of support and showing that you've trained your staff or your instructors or yourself on teaching. You know, which is really what we're going to do, because there's no like legal requirements, so to speak, certainly within the UK for martial arts instructors. There's no course that you can go on or do anything like that. You know, so you need to have that available. You should have a certificate to show the completion date, should have the pass mark on. That's important, really, really important. You also should have certificates for your qualifications as well. So ideally you want something that says you got your black belt on this date. Okay, this is who you got it from. It shows that you have gone through an external process rather than just promoted yourself up. So personally, I've gone down the route of getting black belt certificates and recognized from the IBJJF. I've gone through the UAE BJJ. I've gone through belt checker as well. So all of these things I'm trying to show that I have a skill set to teach. Okay, and that, again, it costs money, but it's important if you ever come across this. Like, I'm trying to demonstrate that I have a knowledge and ability to teach and an expert in jiu-jitsu. Okay, so really, really important. Obviously, there's tons of supporting courses and professional development you can do. Okay, that just, again, they help show that you are trying to mitigate that risk, and you're showing your care for that student. So instructor training is crucial. The next level that you have on top of that would be curriculums as well. Now, curriculums are important. There's two levels. There's curriculum and lesson plans as well. Okay, so curriculum is like, let's say you've got a beginner's curriculum. It's the techniques that you've covered. You've shown that you've thought about what is going into every single one of those classes, like that beginner's curriculum. At this point, I'm showing them this because of X, Y, Z. It is a suitable technique involved in it, you know, and that's important to have. Particularly, so I feel like beginners curriculums are really important. Kids curriculums are really important to have. It's harder when you get onto like kind of your, you know, after they've gone out of that, you know, initial 6-month phase, what's your curriculum? Because jiu-jitsu is such a massive subject that's just getting bigger and bigger. But that's where lesson plans come into play. Okay, so even within your curriculum, you should have a lesson plan for every lesson that you're going to teach. Okay, so I'm going to pull up a blank lesson plan form here, so you can take a look at it. This is one of our lesson plans. This is available up on our site as well. But essentially it goes through a number of different things. It's a form that I got many years ago. It was from someone, and it's laid out in the way that we would start to lay it out if we're going into schools. So there's a couple of really important elements in it. The first one is we have the program title, so what it is. So for us, we call it Essentials. That's kind of our generic program. It might be beginners, it might be peewees, 8 to 12s, whatever you want to call it. And then you have the module title that's linked up to here. The lesson date, so the date that you took that lesson, that might be arranged. It might be a week that you have this and you're following this lesson. Class duration. And then this next section below that is one of the most important, which is safety. Okay, and this is, again, you're looking at risk assessing the techniques that you have in that class. Okay, so in this situation, we were talking about spider guard to X guard attacks. Okay, so naturally we're going to have quite a lot of movement within that. So we're going to have things like, you know, when they're doing the X guard sweeps, we're going to have people falling on each other. We're going to have people potentially, you know, posting on their hands. We're going to have, as I stated, students landing badly. And then what you put next to each of these is the things that you've done to try to mitigate that. So for example, students landing badly is, you know, we're going to do break falls as part of the warm-up. Now, I know a lot of people, warm-ups, my goodness, you can't, you know, warm-ups are a waste of time. You know, warm-ups are there to warm up people's body and prep them for what's going to come later. Anybody that says that warm-ups are a waste of time doesn't know what a warm-up's for. I agree, a 30-minute warm-up where you're doing press-ups and sit-ups and getting exhausted, that's a waste of time. But doing activities that prepare your body for what's coming ahead, crucial. If you go into any sport, like you work with any professional, you're going to do a warm-up, okay? That warm-up's going to be related to what you're doing, so you have to do a warm-up and use the warm-up as a way to injury prevent what's likely to come ahead, okay? So you've got those two things in there, and then the other one is like, you know, setting out specific spaces for people to go into. Remind people not to get too close to each other, and work from there, okay? So with our kids, for example, what we do is we have dots on the floor. So each group of kids goes over a specific dot. That way we know we're keeping them away from anybody else. That is our health and safety. We've risk assessed the likelihood that that's going to go into it. Then from there, you have, oh, this has gone a bit weird, but from there you have, I'm going to get out of this full screen, I'm going to leave it in because I think it's quite funny. You start talking about the specific techniques that we have. You can add mistakes in here. We can talk about the different postures. This kind of comes into coaching in the way that we coach, but you could also add in the safety elements as well. So the spider guard control drill is not really going to have too many because you're just kind of moving side to side. But things like the back sweep, it's could be things like break falling. You know, we've got to talk about break falling within this, how we're going to fall over safely to avoid people getting injured. And, same baby bowler, you might get kicked in the head, but that's kind of, by and by. Then you have a class schedule. Okay, so we have things like, how long we've spent on the warm-up, when we've added our key learning points. So each one of these things over here is a key learning point. We go through it, and then what we use for specific training, and the sparring. And obviously when you're teaching, you're also highlighting any of the dangers of particular situations. So, sparring from X guard, we've got to be aware of our safety, okay? So we might, if we've got a really busy class, we might do something to, so maybe they're working in groups of 3, or maybe we only have a certain number of groups in the middle, or whatever it is, to keep people as safe as possible. So that's the purpose of a lesson plan. The other benefit of lesson plans is it means that if you're not there, you hand someone a lesson plan and boom, you're good to go. You don't have to always be on the mat, okay? So that's our lesson plan, okay? Really important. You should have these for your classes, and you should have them in place as well, okay? And like I said, it serves a number of different purposes. Next, kind of very obvious one, I guess this could go in either way, but you need first aid training for your instructors. It's really important. Basic first aid training can take a couple of hours to do. There are even online courses now where you can go through it and get accredited in it, so you don't even need to get somebody in, but you need to provide a way that people are going through that, and fairly regularly as well, like 2 to 3 years minimum, because again, at the end of it, you're going to get certificates, say, look, 2 years ago I did this first aid course, these are the principles I followed. Now, most kind of emergency basic first aid is going to be really limited in terms of what you can do, and that's okay, because you unless you're a professional, in fact, no one really should be doing anything crazy in a gym. You got to leave that to professionals. You shouldn't be doing like open heart surgery. That's what I'm kind of meaning in that situation. Okay, so basic first aid training, make sure that people do it, make sure it's staying regularly updated as well. The final thing in teaching practice, which I've kind of touched on a little bit, is you've got to risk assess your techniques that you're teaching. Okay, now, like I said, in a lesson plan, that should be done anyway. The lesson plan forces you to think about what you're going to teach, what have I done to mitigate the likelihood of an injury, really important. So another thing that we should be mentioning as well in terms of the teaching elements of things is like partner matching. Particularly in the classes, a lot of instructors are quite loose within their classes, and we are as well. However, if I see that we've got 2 people that are really not good, like, we've got a giant and like, a small person, like, I'm going to switch them around because they're not going to be good training for each other necessarily, but they're also, the risk of injury for the small person goes up drastically. So I might be, okay, you're not going to work together. Certainly in like our comp classes, which are much higher intensity, then I'm going to definitely start partner matching more closely. Belt, weight experience, all of that kind of stuff. So that I know that the people are going to get the best training, but I'm also matching people with a similar sort of skill set, similar sort of athleticism. So the likelihood of injury goes down a little bit, okay, which is kind of what we're trying to get to. Okay, so that's partner matching within that, and obviously we've talked a little bit about risk assessing your techniques. So that, in all honesty, what this allows me then to do is if someone, and this is actually what happened to me in my situation, I wasn't teaching the class, we had one of our instructors who was teaching the class. The situation was he was teaching a Thai boxing class at the time. He was showing like a sweep from the plum. He swept the guy off the thing. Guy posted out on his hand. Actually finished the rest of the class and then came back in later. Said it was hurting. Said the collarbone was broken. We ended up getting sued. Okay, went to court. He had one of those no win no fee lawyery type people involved, which was a bit of a headache. But what I could do is the insurance company came to me. Basically, the insurance company did a lot of the legwork, but they came to me and went, okay, what we need from you, how can you show that you've taken this duty of care? And I was able to go, okay, this is this instructor's, or a copy of this instructor's black belt certificate. This is a copy of his coaching qualification that we put him through. Here's his first aid certificate. This is the lesson plan that he was going. This is the group that this guy was in, the kind of general curriculum. These are the steps that he took to mitigate that injury. This is his first aid qualification. We had this guy sign a waiver and informed consent. And I could just hand this like block of stuff over to the lawyers that showed that we're taking as many precautions as possible to mitigate this this situation from happening. Okay, and you know, thankfully it went relatively favourable for us. The guy took a long time to sue us, and it was all dealt with by the insurance company, and it ended up not being too serious for us. Okay, but I put a lot of that down to having all of these things in place and these proper business practices. Okay, so that's in terms of like there's two sides to this. If you're doing these things as well, you are also setting the students up in the best way to mitigate any injuries from happening. Okay, particularly in something like jiu-jitsu, which is, you know, there's a lot of like blunt force, people's body weight being thrown around, which is where most of our injuries happen. Like, we want to create a situation which is as safe as possible. Okay, and that is like, short of, you know, switching jiu-jitsu over to doing katas, that involves like making sure that people are warm, making sure the techniques are suitable, making sure they're properly partner matched, making sure that we've taken, you know, risk assessed our academy so people aren't falling into it, making sure our coaches are well trained so that they can, you know, teach techniques correctly, inform people about the, you know, common mistakes or potential hazards of doing certain techniques, and putting that thing in place. Okay, so like I said, this is not an exciting video, but it is, in my opinion, one of the most important videos I've shot, and I would highly recommend that, you know, any business, regardless of whether you're in the UK, wherever you are in the world, start to put these things in place. If you need any help setting them up, you know, Chelsea and I have a lot of these things available. So we have lesson plans available, we have curriculums available, we have instructor training available on our site. If you'd like to know what it is, you'd like a little bit more information about that, just message me. And if you'd like my notes and want to set this stuff up yourself, absolutely go ahead and do that. But yeah, if you have any questions, please comment below.